state capitol. This is your Capitol Connection.
Welcome to Capitol Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell. The highly anticipated rollout of the legal recreational marijuana industry in Illinois is scheduled for January 1st, 2020. But in Chicago, it was almost derailed and delayed at least 6 months after an emotional, heated debate broke out on the floor of the City Council chamber floors Wednesday. A number of members of the Black Caucus accused Governor Pritzker's administration of dragging its feet or of not creating faster opportunity for minorities and minority-owned businesses to get their share of the market early on.
The only people that benefit from this deal are the white people. Once again, we get thrown in the jails and they get thrown in the banks.
When I'm hearing stuff about the governor calling people, talking about you got capital budget, I'll stop this, I wish he would.
All white males should not run the industry.
But if you can't afford to get into the business and you're a person of color or someone who's just been left out from around the state, then you'll never get into the business. And so that's why the bill was crafted as it was.
But even as that emotional debate was unraveling and unfolding on the chamber floors in the City Council there, Governor Pritzker's administration fought back forcefully. Governor Pritzker holding a separate conversation and press conference about pension consolidation directly addressed that issue and said that the time will come when social equity and a broader racial component will be a part of the marijuana industry in Illinois. Or put simply, that black business owners will start to get paid for an industry he says has harmed them and their community directly for decades.
This was crafted over the course of 2 years, not a month and a half of quick debate, and we're proud of the bill as it was put together.
So to characterize this as something as anything other than the strongest, most equity-centric thing that is happening in the country right now is offensive on its face. Because that would deny the fact that we looked at the phases that had to come into this. Like the first phase, the licensure from the original operators funds the revolving loan program, which we announced yesterday. So the number one barrier to entrance is access to capital, and we created a revolving loan to help seed social equity applicants. We needed sales to start so that we could fund the money to go into community reinvestment programs, because equity is way bigger than just who owns it. It's also what you do with the money, and it's also how you undo the harms that were actually done during the entire prohibition.
Also from that press conference, Governor Pritzker signed the pension consolidation measure that would combine roughly 650 local police and fire pension funds into two super funds, one for downstate and suburban police, another for fire. That might save up to $2.5 billion over the next 5 years, the Pritzker administration projects. Although some conservative skeptics have raised questions about the validity of those numbers and those projections. On Wednesday, Governor Pritzker shot back at the naysayers.
There are organizations in the state that just want to beat up on the state of Illinois, even though they live here, and not recognize that we all know their challenges and that we're addressing them. And maybe they would like some, silver bullet one-time solution to everything. It doesn't exist.
The transition for all of those investments to be decoupled and put back into these new investment funds could take up to 2.5 years' time to get that done. In the interim and beyond, police and firefighters will still have their benefits administered at the local level, not through a state board. Also this week, new developments in our investigation into Senator Dave Severson and his direct financial ties to companies that will do business with a Rockford casino if the Illinois Gaming Board approves it. Severson's statement of economic interest lists Williams Manny Insurance as a company he works for as a broker. That company provides insurance to Ringland Johnson Construction. That construction company is listed as the preferred general contractor to build the Rockford Casino, and that company's owner is one of Severson's biggest campaign donors. In addition, we also learned that Senator Severson brought Cheap Trick guitarist Rick Nielsen onto the floor of the Senate at a very sensitive time when lawmakers were considering the pending legislation of whether or not to put a casino in Rockford at all. He also visited the House floor, and that may have very well been a violation of House and Senate rules. House rules allow anyone to come up here to the fourth floor House gallery where you can watch down and see lawmakers engage in debate, but you can't take part. anyone who speaks out in support or opposition to a measure the House is considering, the rules say security can kick you out. And to get access to the third floor, the House chamber where lawmakers do their work, is highly restricted. House Speaker Michael Madigan's office acknowledged Tuesday, quote, "We may need to tighten the restrictions on who can join the House floor." Spokesman Steve Brown confirmed they did authorize a floor pass for a guest of Rockford Representatives Maurice West and Joe Sosnowski on May 15th.
Hi, I'm Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick.
Hall of Fame musician Rick Nielsen is State Senator Dave Severson's business partner through the Stockholm Inn in Rockford.
They're here tonight, or this afternoon, to talk about the importance of gaming in Illinois and why Illinois should be passing gaming legislation.
A Rockford casino could mean big bucks for Nielsen. His wife invested directly in the Hard Rock Casino project. So what brings you to Springfield today?
I'm trying to help in the gaming industry. Like, I came down here to see if I could kick it in the butt a little bit. I'd like to see Governor Pritzker. I want to talk to him.
Both in the House and here in the Senate, lobbyists often wait to meet with politicians and try to win their support just outside these walls. They're just not allowed to do it on the floor. People who lobby support from lawmakers, especially on behalf of corporations, are required to walk down these halls to register as a lobbyist. Despite his personal interest in a casino project, Nielsen never did that. And as Senator Dave Severson's guest, he got access very few people ever get on the Senate floor. When we come back, our conversation with House Republican Tim Butler. He weighs in on whether or not Senator Severson should have brought his guest, Rick Nielsen, onto the floor while lawmakers were considering that casino. That and more is coming up.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. We're joined now by Springfield Republican and House Representative Tim Butler. It's good to have you with us, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you and your
Mark.
family.
Merry Christmas to you and the viewers.
Yeah, I think a big Christmas gift, perhaps, a holiday gift to the trade unions this year and to a number of different people around Illinois was this $45 billion capital infrastructure plan. I believe you supported this in large part. Give us an update from where you sit on the Springfield and Central Illinois broader progress here. What's the timeline like before we can see cement trucks out and helping repave roads? What's all that going to look like in this capital bill?
Well, the capital bill is kind of divided into two categories. It's horizontal, which is the roads and bridges, is verticals, which is basically buildings. I think the roads and bridges portion of it, which that's funded through the motor fuel tax and some of the other fees, and that's IDOT that largely oversees that program through their multi-year plan. I think you're already starting to see some benefits in there. We just broke ground a couple weeks ago here in Springfield on the next phase of the 10th Street Rail relocation project, and that's pretty much the first project that's going to get funded under the new capital bill.
Every time we talk about the capital infrastructure bill and the gas tax, we get viewer calls and questions. What about that lockbox?
Yep.
So is it still true that all the money that comes from the gas pump, the taxes there at the motor fuel tax, goes into a lockbox that can only be used for transportation? And sort of a follow-up question there, how flexible is that term transportation? Because we saw some of those dollars might have been earmarked to go toward like a South Suburban airport or something like that. I mean, what kind of projects can the state fund out of the lockbox broadly?
Right. So the transportation lockbox is a part of our Constitution. It was approved by the voters in 2016. It's an important part of the Constitution that says the money you pay at the pump at the gas tax goes into transportation-related funding for projects.
Not just roads and bridges, though.
Not just roads and bridges. So some of it goes to transit. And obviously Chicago is a big beneficiary of transit because of the mass transit needs they have in the Chicago region. We have mass transit downstate, but not the same needs that they have in Chicago. Yes, there's some that might go to a potential third airport, especially when it comes from infrastructure on you're going to have to build exits and roadways and things like that. And so, but that money that you pay at the pump definitely goes through IDOT for the most part to spend on transportation-related purposes. And I think that's a good thing for the state of Illinois.
On the other side, the construction projects at universities, at schools that build upwards, hospitals even, a lot of that revenue came from a different portion of the capital bill, which was expanding of gaming. Did the cannabis revenue at all touch that?
No, cannabis goes into the general funds,
Separate, right.
but it's the parking structure tax, it's the cigarette tax.
Car trade-in tax, I believe.
The big part of it is gaming. Half of the potential revenue into the vertical capital comes out of the gaming expansion that we had. And right now, we're not seeing any of that revenue come in the door. Sports betting is yet to be up and going. The Chicago casino, the mayor of Chicago really, I think, dropped the ball in veto session by not She wants to change the rates on the Chicago casino. We should have got that done during veto session, but she didn't get it done. She didn't talk to the House Republicans hardly at all, which I think we could have been helpful.
When you look at the way that this gaming expansion and the casino expansion is rolling out, there are examples in Danville where a former House Democrat, a powerful ally of Speaker Madigan, who is now a lobbyist, Lou Lang, was reported as being paid as a consultant through that casino there. Or in Rockford, where Republican State Senator Dave Severson has very close business partners and campaign donors who just happen to win the project approval from the city there, and they're in prime position to make a lot of money. And then you see what happened with the feds indicting Luis Arroyo, the former House Democrat from Chicago, for allegedly or caught on tape trying to bribe a state senator for sweepstakes expansion. There's been some fight in the Republican side of the Senate, too, with Leader Brady and his involvement personally making money off of video gaming. Once these stories start to pile up, what's your view on the public perception of gaming and gambling and lawmakers who have personal interest or indirect interest in how this rolls out? Does that become a drag on the Capitol bill at some point?
Well, I certainly, I don't have any big issues with gaming itself. I think it's how gaming is carried out and the people that are involved with gaming. I was supportive of the gaming bill, but I think what we need to do as a state is make sure we have great transparency for conflicts of interest that people might have. And you saw this come up in the veto session, and House Republicans have thrown some proposals out there that we hope to see go through. I think the number one that we need to do, I was the top Republican on Representative Arroyo's Capital Committee. I had no idea that he was a lobbyist for the city of Chicago. I mean, and to think that someone could sit in as a legislator and also be a lobbyist, to me is really beyond the pale. I think the other thing we need to take a hard look at is something that Congress does. And a lot of my colleagues probably won't agree with this. I think we need to really start looking hard at the potential to limit outside income of members of the General Assembly. We get paid, if you're in leadership, you get paid about $80,000 a year to be in these jobs. It's a good job. Congress really limits your outside income on what you can make. And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble ethically, is because they have pressures with their outside income that overlap with their legislative duties. And I think we need to take a hard look at that as we go through the process with this new ethics commission and look at ways that we make sure that we have transparency and people aren't having conflicts, and if they have conflicts, they need to step forward and report them.
Toward the end of session, if we rewind the clock back to the end of summer there, Senator Severson's neighbor and business partner, the Hall of Fame rocker Rick Nielsen from the band Cheap Trick, was here. He was specifically seeking an audience with Governor Pritzker. He said to us on camera he wanted to kick this casino thing in the butt a little bit. He wanted to get it to happen. He was clearly lobbying on behalf of this interest through his public advocacy. He was also on the floor of the House and Senate. I don't believe other lobbyists have that kind of access to the actual floor of the House or Senate. Was that an appropriate act in your view?
Well, I certainly, lobbyists do not have access to the floor. That's strictly forbidden. To be on the floor of the House of Representatives, it's a high bar. While we're in session, is a very high bar to meet. You have to be there as a guest of a legislator or a guest of leadership. I can't just have someone show up for the day and bring them onto the floor. I don't know why Mr. Nielsen was on the floor. Everybody talked to him. I talked to him. Hey, it's an iconic Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member. Seemed like a nice guy. But I think in that capacity, when he's here for a day to advocate for the Rockford Casino, that probably was not the ethically right thing to do, to have him on the floor of the House of Representatives. And I think this is an issue, again, that will come up, I think, through this process when we look at our ethics laws into the spring. How do you define a lobbyist? Is Tim Butler advocating back to the city of Springfield about an issue? Do I become a lobbyist somehow? I think these are the kind of questions that we need to figure out on where we go. But certainly, I think what happened with Mr. Nielsen on the floor probably should not have happened, and I'm not sure how he got on the floor, but it probably should not have happened.
Very interesting. I remember, you might have actually been involved with this. There was a gentleman who dresses up like Abraham Lincoln. People were trying to get him on the floor for pictures, and the House would not allow it. Abraham Lincoln actually used to be a House representative here,
George Buss is his name. George is a great Lincoln reenactor from Freeport, Illinois. I've known him for a long time. He was here for an event, and they would not let him on the floor. And I get it. I mean, George he's a nice guy, but they just decided he shouldn't be on the floor. We did have him up in the gallery for photos and everything. So, like I said, it's a high bar, to me to be able to bring somebody on the floor of the House of Representatives while we're in session.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
You can watch the full discussion on our website. Look for it there, and we'll be right back.
Watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Starting New Year's Day, Illinois becomes the 11th state in the nation to allow the sale of small amounts of legal recreational marijuana. That was a big political fight here in Springfield that highlighted much of 2019's debate and activity. But even now, there is a fight at the local level all across the state about where the product can be sold, where it cannot, and who gets to make money off of that in the process. Joining us now is House Democrat Carol Ammons from Urbana. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I remember there was an emotional moment from you during the floor debate back in May about this entire issue, and I wonder how closely have you watched and been a part of the rollout since to allow for the sale of legal recreational marijuana, but also to make sure that it lives up to its promise to repair the harms of the war on drugs and to try and create some new revenue stream or some new mechanism that helps affected communities, minority communities, African American communities profit from now this new industry. How well is that going, do you think, so far?
My concern is this. I saw a bit of the conversation happening in the city of Chicago yesterday in their council chambers. There is a fundamental issue that is going to manifest itself come January 1. And one of those fundamental issues is that if we want to bring equity to the space, then we are starting at a point that is not equitable. Meaning, if you believe that existing medical dispensaries who will also get their recreational license on January 1 and providing for social equity applicants who are really not at the starting line, they're like 50 paces back, that is not going to create the equity. And I think what I saw in the argument in the city council chambers as I jumped in towards the end of that, right before the vote, was that communities of color who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs are also going to experience somewhat of a significant delay. They don't have the investment dollars that are already in the medical space. They don't have a location. And so financing is going to be a real part of the problem that's going to continue to show the disparity between those who are owners now, which are all white, and those who are trying to find a way into the space. The fund that is going to be made available by way of those sales January 1, that's just not enough to open a dispensary. And so there's going to be some real disparities that come about.
I think it's $30 million. The fund hopes to reach $30 million of capital money that it can provide loans as seed money.
Absolutely, at some point.
That's not enough.
Oh, that's not enough. So we know a dispensary to really be operational is going to cost you $1.3 million upward. And so that loan is really going to be a small investment from the state where there's very little dollars available already in that economically disenfranchised community. And so we have some fixing that we're going to have to do come July of 2020. And once we look back, you know, I'm a supporter of completely legalization, right? We've not totally legalized in a way that I see legalization. Mm-hmm. So I'm a supporter of legalization, but I'm also a supporter of real equity being built into this program, and I don't see that as of yet.
The Chicago Black Caucus was saying in City Council on Wednesday this week, essentially, in so many words, rich white guys who've already been making the money on medical for years have a significant head start.
Absolutely.
And everybody else has to wait a lot longer to hope for a chance that maybe if they get the right financing in the right area, that possibly they can catch up, but wait your turn.
So think about it like this. Right now, the medical space does not allow for a legitimate business to go into a bank and say, would you give me a loan to open up my business? Because federally, you can't do that, right? So there's some banking issues that happen in our community. So where are you going to get the investment dollars to really open up this space? You got to find some private investors. You got to find someone willing to take a chance on your idea, your dispensary, your plan. And that is harder than people realize. And so because I've seen this in other communities, I went to Drug Policy Alliance conference this year in St. Louis. This is not just Illinois. This is happening in California, in Colorado, in spaces that have been in this area much longer than we have, and yet equity still doesn't exist in those places. And so I think this is going to be a very long stretch in order for us to really see what's going on. I see it now. I would have done it a little differently. I would have said social equity applicants in DIA, meaning disproportionately impacted areas, we're going to release licenses to you with technical assistance on the front end. I'm going to have these medical people stay medical for the first 6 months. I would have done that differently.
You would have reversed the order.
I would have
make them wait.
Absolutely. I would have reversed the order. That's not what happened. We got what we have, and we'll see what happens.
Interesting. I wonder, though, how confident you are in this administration to still get there at some point over time. I'll give a few points of context. Representative John Gordon Booth said that this bill and the social equity pieces of it are about reparations. Those were her words. Christian Mitchell, the deputy governor, just this week said that this measure does create pathways, clear pathways through financing and in carving out these disproportionately impacted areas. He says this gives a real leg up, and to block or slow this down now would put that at risk. And that Governor Pritzker said it may not happen overnight, but we're going to get there at some point. How confident are you that they can actually achieve that goal, even if it takes a little while longer than you had hoped?
I hope that they're right. I hope that I'm being an eternal pessimist on this issue. I don't see the path as clearly as they do. I know what I've seen on the person-to-person level, those who are entrepreneurs who are trying to get into the space. I do know that there are lots of hurdles in doing so. I hope that they're right, and ultimately they will see the results that they expect to see.
Representative Carol Amos.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're back in just a moment.
Stay connected to the Capitol all week. Follow us on Twitter at CapConnectIL. Watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA 3. You can also find us on Facebook or WCIA.com.